Hello and welcome to another episode of the Richard and Dr. Ed Show. I think I keep saying this, even though we've already said it in the intro, the automatic intro that goes in. But anywho, how are you doing, Ed?
I'm good. And I always say that too. But I'm very busy. I've done a few recent pieces of content and podcasts, and people seem to be on board with the ideas that we've been putting out for quite a long time in different fields.
Yeah.
And I guess the more exposure we get, the more people will start to be like, oh, that makes sense. It makes sense that rather than being afraid of everything and trying to hide from stress, what about just getting better at managing stress? Which seems like a
Right.
rational thing to do.
Yeah, it's there's a whole lot that can go into this. I think that the whole management of stress by not facing the stress kind of builds up more stress.
Yeah.
So you have to start somewhere. And I think that you have a whole lot of things going on. I have a whole lot of things that are going on at the moment as well. And, we are humans. I get overwhelmed. I think I sent you a message yesterday. I was in bed by 8:30 because I have been overwhelmed. I'm currently a single dad of two kids as Day is away in Mexico. I have 4 or 5 projects that I'm running at the same time, and I'm starting a sixth because why not? And it can get overwhelming. So I decided that the best way for me to actually handle the stress was actually recovery, because I felt very, very tired. Whether it was a crash because I was overwhelmed with stress or not, the night of a good night's rest and the capacity to kind of allocate my thoughts. I problem solve a lot in my dreams, and then I woke up this morning and I was able to start to kind of section things off and figure out what are the most important things that I need to be working on. And also understanding that there's blocks. So for me, one of the biggest things, of the best ways for me to deal with stress is going like, okay, I have all these things that are going on at once. I can't be working on them all at the same time. So I need a 2 block window for this, a 2 block window for this, a 2 block window for this, like a 2 hour block or 1 hour block or 30 minutes. And then from there, I can slowly start to peel away. And what I don't finish, and I can bring it up with the next block. But at least I know that there's an order to things. I don't know if you work similarly.
Well, I think it's knowing that, for me, it's telling the signs when things get more chaotic that you need to. We've talked about this in terms of working with clients before, is helping people find their anchor in the rhythm of their day to then have a platform to then start getting on with the things that need to happen. It's
Right.
when it gets out of control and you perceive that there's so many things that need to get done, but you don't have the opportunity to have the reset. So having a good night's sleep is usually one of the best ways to find that reset for a lot of people.
Right.
And the way that I would coach that is that your day starts when you go to sleep. It doesn't start when you wake up, because then if you optimize and prioritize that most important thing to get done, i.e. sleeping, then the next thing that happens in your day is when you wake up, and then you can start to, as you say, add structure where there may have not been structure before. And this kind of applies to the way that we work with movement and the way that we work, or I work with cells too.
Right.
I was trying to think about, like, all of these processes and things it's all noise until you start working on it, and then it becomes the signal amongst the noise. So it's just building those clear signals back into the system when everything is so noisy.
Right. Yeah, it's you were talking about, like, these waves, and I always say you got to ride the wave, and understand where you are in the wave. And I don't know if you remember, I wrote to you, was it last week? And I was like, hey, I'm feeling like super tired. I feel, kind of exhausted. I'm kind of lower in energy. You're like, we just need a baseline of supplements and, kind of doing all this stuff. And then I started to actually looking back on it, And, I always say it's easy to get people feeling good, but keeping them feeling good, including myself, is difficult. And as soon as you said that, I was like, holy shit. Like, which, simple things make a big difference. Since I came back from Mexico, I haven't been doing my calf raises nor my push-ups first thing in the morning with my water and my salt, my
Yeah.
Cornish salt, electrolytes. And I was like, well, holy shit, Richard, like, even I get very comfortable being uncomfortable
Yeah.
and complaining to other people about being tired or not having energy. And I'm like, dude, what's going on? So now it's been about a week maybe or so, maybe a little bit less, of waking up in the morning, walking on the balls of my feet, doing my calf races in the morning. I force myself to do at least 2 sets of push-ups to my failure, just to kind of get a good little pump going. And then I drink my water with electrolytes. I wait about 45 minutes before I have my coffee. I'm doing my vitamin D because there's no sun here. I try to still get out, as the sun starts to rise, even though there's no sun, it's just clouds here. But I still get outside and get a little bit of exposure, and I feel my energy slowly starting to come back up. And so it's even for us that are in this all the time, we still tend to forget the simple things that we can do to kind of feel better and get the flow going after we wake up. And yeah, it's these waves and these frequencies that you seem to be a master of have a lot more to impact our bodies than I think people give it credit for.
Yeah. Well, I like just to go back, there's a term that I think I got from Sarah Solomon, who she calls these things body broccoli. It's the thing that's on your plate and you're kind of like, don't really fancy it today, but if you remember to put it on your plate, you'll probably feel better the next couple of days. It's super simple stuff.
Yeah, it's a simple shit in life. But the croissant always tastes so much better.
It does.
Yeah. So speaking of these waves, we were playing around for a while with the biorhythms, which I haven't gone back and looked at probably in the last 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
We talk about these frequencies, and as much as people say that men don't have a cycle like women do, I think that we do run through different cycles. I notice it, especially like libido wise, creative and business. Like those are like three main things that like I see one will always take charge over the other. And there's times where I'm wanting to, like the last, 3-4 weeks, like libido's been up through the roof, and I've had, you know, business mindset, but my creative side hasn't been there. So like doing post on social media, or like trying to do like content creation, or even like searching like new concepts for the mentoring program and stuff have been like pretty downhill. Topics for podcasts, things like this have been down. And again, I try to fight it, but I think that there is some sort of rhythm that men go through where like libido will go up, libido will go down. You'll want to do more business and creative stuff. Then you'll kind of want more creative libido stuff. Then you'll want more creative business stuff. Then you'll want more business and libido. And, we kind of have these waves. Do you want to talk a little bit about the biorhythms? Because that was something that you brought up to me, and it's been fascinating. Every time I look them up, not that I look them up all the time, but when I do, I'm like, oh, that's actually spot on.
Yeah.
It
So
confirms where I feel.
I think I got the idea. So I was listening to Dr. Ted, as I have done a lot, and he talked about there being evidence that males do have a testosterone rhythm, and it was more like half a month as opposed to the women's monthly cycle. And I actually have never found the references for that. The problem is there's a lot of papers that he's spoken about that kind of get swept under the carpet. There's another one that I guess some people would say would be controversial, that if you look at nutrients from animal foods versus plant-based foods, that human cells tend to more easily absorb the animal sources, and if you radio label them, they're more easily incorporated into the cell, which is super interesting. But I haven't seen the papers. But yeah, the biorhythms kind of came off the back of that. So I was doing some searching, and there's these, you guys can go and have a look at them. There's these free calculators on, if you just Google biorhythm calculator, and you just put in your kind of birth and those kind of things. Obviously, when you go to Google, it says that biorhythms are a pseudoscientific blah blah blah. So,
of course.
I think the fact that we have a very precise daily rhythm, or not precise, but we have a vague daily rhythm, we have a weekly rhythm, we have a seasonal rhythm, we have a yearly rhythm. And there's certainly patterns I've seen, like certain ages of people that they just kind of go through certain shifts in their perspective. We call them midlife crises in the Western world. Like, I think it's important to keep an open mind about these things, because if there is something there, why wouldn't we look at it? And that's always my perspective with everything.
Right.
And as you say, is if we know that these rhythms exist and we don't try and fight against them, but we actually just flow with the wave of it, as you've said, then we can feel much more content in the moment and not try, like anxiety is, try and be another state that we want to be in, or be harsh on ourselves when we might not necessarily want to be doing certain types of work, when society or the pressures that we put on ourselves or other people put on us try and force us into a specific pattern. And that's what we do as coaches, is allow you to auto-regulate your system, to see your system as it is. And if you really fractalize these rhythms down to the moment by moment basis, these would be your breathing rate, your heart rate. And what we're working on more recently is the rate or the rhythm of the contraction of muscles. And I think we've touched on this in previous podcast episodes, but there's a type of breathwork practice in the literature called coherent breathing. And it just got me thinking that perhaps as we've moved through understanding emotional mapping, perhaps there is a link there to the rhythmicity of the muscular contraction and how that relates to the heart rate and the breathing. And that's what you're playing with recently. We can't really give anybody too much.
It's been interesting.
Specific. Yeah.
I've been testing it out now for probably, what is it? Well, since Australia, I brought it up, right? And then I've been, kind of testing on and off. I go in these kind of spurts until it kind of becomes clear or apparent to me. But I sent you the data the other day, which I need to get a few beta testers to kind of go after it. But there's an interesting correlation between heart rate, breath, and contraction at certain parts of the body and how they start to connect. And it takes this is where we kind of talk about the connection or the neural output of the muscle from its max intensity point of afferent contractions, right? So reactive contractions, to an actual efferent understanding of how the muscle is, the interoceptive aspect of the muscle moving, and the heart rate calms down. So it's just a play on these sort of waves, and you called it best, these oscillations between breath, heart, muscle, and then going through different chakra points, which again all kind of sounds like pseudoscience, but when it comes to the experience and when it comes to showing the practicality of it, it's actually extremely applicable. And we can see that there needs to be this sort of shift in a person's mentality in order for them to have the change physically. We're going to have Terry on the podcast again, because it's been a year since we started working with her, with her lower back and her hip. And I got a message the other day, and I need to see if I can share the picture. But, the booty is starting to grow, and the booty started growing because after 9 months or so, she finally started to understand that a lot of the reasons that there was discomfort in the hip had to do with events or perception of past events and not letting go. And so as we start to let go, we start to express anger. We start to have the true primal expression. We start to get the heart rate to elevate, and the understanding the heart rate elevating is not necessarily a sign of pain or discomfort, then we can create the acceptance and the muscle fibers start to fire better. So the booty is growing, which is something that, as a it seems to be like a goal, right? For a lot of people, like, I want my butt to grow. Why isn't my butt growing? Well, you haven't expressed and you haven't created acceptance, and there needs to be certain oscillations and a certain shift. As much as the shift needs to happen mentally, I think the amount of stress that you can tolerate without quitting physically or, physically, mentally, or emotionally, right? Meaning, like, the heart rate doesn't spike so much that it freaks you out and makes you stop. The lung and the reception of the lungs don't freak you out, and the capacity to stay in that contraction, that intensity, all need to be aligned for there to be that shift in perception. I went on a little bit of a rant there.
Well, no, because I want to go on a rant too, because just listening to that and some recent experiences I've had with people is that there is so many layers to this stuff, and there's a lot of learning that I've had to do off the back of what you've had to learn. And I'm lucky in that I've got shortcuts because you've learnt it before I have. But the fact that you, like, the amount of work that you put in the early days for each muscle, and now putting in the amount of work that you do for these new concepts, and then somebody comes along to me after I give them some things to go and try, and then they come back and say, it felt good. I need a bit more information because I need like a framework to make all of this make sense. Right. And it's really hard to answer those questions because there's so many hours and practical experiments that have gone into it through experience that just giving somebody all of that information just seems like it's not the way to help. And I think in the most cases, a lot of people need to go away and do a significant amount of work for them, not necessarily to learn the same lessons as us, but to learn as much as they can without the guidance in some cases, because then the mysteries and the principles will present themselves to them when they're ready for them.
Right. Well, it's a conditioning thing, right? I mean, it's like, I go do the workshop, like the Motion Star Muscles workshop or an assessment seminar, and I have all these coaches that are used to having these seminars that give you a certification at the end of the weekend or at the end of the day because they've gotten the information, or the knowledge, I mean, right? It's just information being handed out. Mm-hmm. And they are being taught in a simplistic way where they go, if you can get the arm from here to here, the shoulder is fixed. It's like, well, not really. And like, I'll go and I always do, I teach the psoas race. And before I teach the psoas race, I give the background and the history of, I did this exercise every single day for 9 months to understand every single type of displacement. I'm still learning from it. And sometimes I still don't connect as much as I should because of emotional, environmental aspects, right? Stressors. And I give all of the constraints of the breathing, what you should be looking for, what the connection could kind of feel like. And then I go, all right, well, let's break up into teams. Let's go try it out. And we go at it for 5 minutes, and you have the coach that has the big ego that wants to be able to understand everything. So therefore, of course, he can connect to it right away. And within 5 minutes, he's like, oh yeah, that was easy. And I was like, all right, cool. I mean, you have your own, if you're a master of it already, that's great. Hopefully you can apply it to others and, make it work better. And there's people that can't connect to it and want to understand why. And I'm like, did you not listen to the whole pre-story of, I spent 9 months every single day for like 10 minutes every single day on trying to understand why I couldn't connect, how I was connecting, not connecting, what was good, what was bad. There is so much time and effort put into it. And you want me to hand it over to you and make it happen in 5 minutes. It's a skill, right? Yeah. And it's a present skill. So you need the neuroplasticity. And so I think that for a lot of, coaches and health practitioners out there, they've been given the recipes and expect it to be, a 3-star Michelin chef. And it's like, that's like the new standard practice, and it should never be like that. I mean, at least with the medical world, part of your testing to become a doctor, you still have the how you treat a client and how you talk to a client, like that is still being tested. But for the most part, a lot of these coaches, and there's that big communication of like, how much management needs to be done with, how much control should these bigger governing bodies have over personal trainers or CrossFit coaches. And you're seeing a big revolution right now. At least I'm seeing it because I've been in it now for over a decade, where you see this churn of coaches that are coming out. So you see a lot of new coaches and personal trainers that are coming in that are extremely passionate, wanting to help people. And you see a lot of these coaches that were passionate, but really they were just regurgitating information nonstop. And then they went more towards the business side than the actual craft of being a good coach and connecting with humans, finding new livelihoods, which is fair. And so you start to see these sort of churning points where at least the medical system, maybe not for the good, but, when I look at my dad, like my dad's not even practicing and he's still trying to better his craft. He's still learning. He's still educating. He's still trying to, practice and apply what he's learning. And I see a lot of PTs and coaches that are like, oh, well, I have my certification, therefore I know what I'm doing. And all they're doing is just sending out recipes, right? So there is a moment where you as a client also need to understand you need to put in the reps. And it's the coach's job, the navigator's job. Like I had a client that came back to me. He's like, hey, my lower back pain's getting worse. It's not actually getting better. And I was like, okay, so let's look at everything that you've been doing. And the Dimmel deadlifts were being done with the barbell, no longer with the dumbbell. The, all of the movements were not being done with heavy stress, that were being done with lightweight. So I was like, okay, so this is where we kind of went off the beaten path. So now let's bring it back in. I'll do all of your Dimmel deadlifts with the heaviest dumbbell you can find. 2 sets in, back feels better. We were doing, Swami was being done, but he was focusing so much on the glutes, which is still going towards glute med and iliacus, because there wasn't still the connection to the glute max, and the psoas major wasn't there. So I said, all right, so we have good connection to the pec. So let's focus on breathing and contracting the pec major, because if we can work on that, it's going to still give us the connection to have the mobility of the psoas major and the pecs aligned. And now his breathing is a lot shallower, right? So shorter inhales, longer exhales, but back is feeling better. So that's the job of us as coaches and professionals, is we've been through all of these broken points and we know kind of how to bring it all back in. I don't know if you've watched you probably haven't, but the Loki series with the timelines and all of the spread out timelines, and then their job at the TVA, the timeline something agency, is to cut off like all of these sort of bad timelines and bring it back to the main timeline.
Okay.
That's kind of what we're doing here as coaches, right? Like we're allowing these sort of outer timelines to kind of wave out, and then we kind of bring it back in, and we're just trying to oscillate these time frames.
Right. That's the constraint. Like there's a overall general goal, but then the constraints are here, which are, as long as you're not working too far outside of them, will bring you back into the middle. I've had 2 things that's stimulated. Is one, there was a coach that was asking me about a client with IBS, so irritable bowel, which is very linked to anxiety. And the question was regarding the medical system had prescribed that person an antidepressant to try and help with the mood that would then help the gut, which is actually fairly common. But I said, well, this is, now I believe that the anxiety field is under your jurisdiction if you want to be a good coach. So
right.
I said, this is, if you want to help them and they're willing to be helped and they would rather not go down that path, then you can help them. You just need to up your game in terms of your coaching craft. The knowledge that I've given you that how they're related isn't the answer. It's, can you help your client with how they're feeling, and not just counting their macros and giving them the program and the sets and reps that they need to do to reach the aesthetic goals, which are probably feeding the anxiety in the first place and the IBS and all of those other things. Right. So there's definitely a turning point at the moment where you essentially either subscribe to these concepts that we're teaching or you don't, and eventually you will have to.
Yeah, I mean, they'll start becoming will become common knowledge, right? I mean, it's the I think Wim Hof has done a great job of showing how this kind of pseudoscience craziness stuff can be turned around so quickly in a decade. I mean, it's 2024. He started going in the public eye, and he kind of came into the public eye as a freak show in the Discovery Channel that were doing like the superhuman powers or whatever. And I think he did like swimming in the Arctic Ocean or a marathon in the Arctic Circle or something like that with just like shorts and barefoot.
Yeah.
And they started to study the concepts and come up. And I think that you know our form of success is the continuation of being here and practicing what we preach and having those that do buy into our concepts, apply them, and having great results. And I think in the long run, as you start to get on more podcasts, as we start to get this stuff published, and actually start to gather the data points, all of this stuff will end up being proven. Hence why 2 years ago I said I had a crazy dream.
Crazy dreams.
Life, huh, Ed? What was it that you said? Dr. Ted said that it was interesting because the well-damped control function, so the waves of imperfection or
yeah, so
my brain power's
I don't
gone
think
away.
it was him. It was a resource that I'd got secondary, but it was
Okay.
It was basically if you look at the natural mathematical patterns in nature, them being like the Fibonacci sequence and all of these types of things, you can they use them in certain like yogic fields and things. You see these patterns that tend towards zero, so to speak. So like the shape of pine cones and shells and trees and stuff. And if you map it all mathematically, you see that oscillating function that tends to zero, so to speak. And it's that shape that is these cycles that our clients go through of initially there's kind of bigger issues that show themselves, and over time the issues and the deviations from the path towards better get smaller and smaller, and the intensity of the symptoms go down, and the discomfort goes down, and the suffering goes down. Right. And it's just knowing that something is going to come up, the stress is going to be there to knock you off the path, but you now have learned the tools that we've taught you to bring you back to the path more quickly. And it's the clients, from my perspective, it's the clients that don't realize that they already have the tools at their disposal. I always say to people, like when they come to an assessment, if you master the Swami, the oblique opener, I probably don't need to tell you much more, because there's so many principles in there that you can apply to every single movement and everything in your life. But it's a reiteration in lots of different facets that people, one of these ways of explaining something, one movement, one connection to one muscle, will give them the insight to be like, okay, now I understand. And
what news?
I've had a client that again had a big deviation from the progress, and it was I think it was 2 or 3 months until they came back to me, because I think they felt a bit sheepish about they were blaming themselves that they'd messed the progress up. And it's realizing the progress isn't linear, and it's not messing it up. It's just, you just need to head back towards better. And off the back of that, we had a really good session. And then now they've referred me a client who sounds like they had a similar problem. They had a similar story in that they made a lot of progress with a practitioner, and then went away, felt like they messed it up, but that practitioner hadn't explained to them that this is more likely to happen, or is likely to happen. So they lost their trust. So they haven't gone back to the same person, and they've said that they've already spent lots of money. And that's the problem. I think if we need to be transparent about these cycles with the people that we're working with, and hopefully we are.
Yeah, I mean, that's why now I just do, if there's like lower back or shoulder issues, like it's a fairly simple thing. You have a I have a program, and then you follow it, you stay consistent with it, and we start to see the progress. But when there's these sort of bigger issues at hand, whether it's gut issues, libido issues, high anxiety, high stress, whatever the symptoms are coming from, right? I think that it's a year program minimum, and then from there you start to really find that auto regulation.
Yeah.
And it takes time
Yeah,
and work.
I've been cautious about working with people who don't have necessarily a pain problem, because I'm obviously a medical doctor, but I'm
Right.
also a movement coach. And I've been working with a guy, I think, for just over a month. And we haven't done any specific gut testing, but I was very sure that I'm not very sure. There's a high probability of chance that your ability to connect with certain muscles is going to change the way that your gut functions, purely because we've seen this with somebody that we know, that if you interrupt the afferent signals from the nerves, like at the rib cage or anywhere around there, then that can feed back to the spinal cord, which then feeds to the efferent and afferent systems that connect to the organs. And that can cause real symptoms.
Right.
And we know a specific case of this where there's mechanical impacts to the gut through the movement patterns. And therefore, by changing the movement patterns, my guess is that we can begin to alter the way that the gut motility functions and all of those important things that we need to digest, absorb, process food, and just how we feel. The gut is our primitive brain that interacts with the nervous system and the environment. So I think it's been 5-6 weeks, and they've just admitted that after doing the Swami now with weight, because they were pretty not weak on the connection, but they needed more neural output to the psoas and the left side. It started to, like, once they do a long Swami, they can feel the increase in appetite and the gut moving more actively.
Epic. Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, and it takes time, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is that people are wanting to have that pill that's going to make the change now. And they, you need to realize that it's going to take more than one session. It takes a build up, because it took a long time for your gut to get there.
Yeah.
So 5-6 weeks making progress is, as long as you're making progress towards getting better and better and better, that's the key.
Yeah. And it's very
you give
cool.
it a year and then you don't remember.
You obviously have the assessment course on Moved Academy. I recommend that for any healthcare practitioners who have an open mind, is that they start to draw these concepts together.
Right.
It's having the tool of even just the eye test. You can see where the body holds on to tension and stress. In many cases, you won't be able to, but when there's significant medical things going on or health issues, then there's more likely to be high stress in the system, and you might see something that at least when you feel like there's nothing you can do to help somebody, and then you have this tool to assess somebody's stress, then you can go away and take that tool and improve it, and at least you know that you're helping in one way, and that way might eventually help the original issue. But we make no claims to diagnose or treat diseases using that.
It works, but we don't claim it. What a crazy world we live in. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, Mr. Ed. Well, I think our time is up for this week and this podcast, because I do have another client coming up here that I have to get on another call on. But it's been great. The world seems to function in these waves and these frequencies. If you guys want to get in touch with us, make sure to follow us at Dr. Ed Caddy on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of them. Just look up Dr. Ed Caddy, at Rare Barracuda at all of the platforms. If you guys would like to if you guys have any questions, send them our way and we can answer them for you on the podcast. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great time.
Movement Ayahuasca, Idaho. Don't remember.
Oh, yes.
Don't
We have Movement Ayahuasca in the U.S. It is coming up June 1st to the 5th. I will be setting up an Emotions in Our Muscles and Assessment seminar the week after. So the weekend of the June 8th-ish. Belgium, we have Emotions in Our Muscles in February 24th. Iceland, we have April 4th and 5th. So lots of cool dates and locations coming up, guys. Peace.
Check them out. Bye.